This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by a couple of my good buddies, Clinton Bonner and Adam Emmert, as we got the news on this Monday that the Seahawks have fired offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. I want to start out by saying that even though it was something that we were not happy with, like the original decision, we wanted him to succeed because we're Seahawks fans. And now we're just going to say, I told you so, because Adam, coaching, going from college to the NFL is really, really hard.
Yeah, it turns out. And I feel like I've taken a victory lap or two already on this sort of thing, so I'm not going to do it again. But at the end of the day here, Ryan Grubb's a human and he's got a family and this is his job. So while I am happy with the move for the Seahawks here, I'm also sad for Ryan Grubb. Because again, good dude, seems like a quality guy. And so I don't want to, anybody to get the impression that we're dancing on his professional grave here or anything like that, because it is a bummer. Real people's lives are affected. But beyond that, oh, thank God. I can't wait to get some dude who knows how to run the football. How about you, Clinton?
Well, I know what it's like to be laid off as well. It stinks, right? So I've been on that side of the coin. The tough conversations, these weird combos with HR when things stop, when things start. It's all hell breaks loose, and I can only imagine on the level that he's at. So I wish him the best, man to man, and I have to put that in a compartment and just move forward and do the job of this. Just analyze it, talk, celebrate. I'm having a beer. I think it's a good thing, guys. Right before we got on, right before Brandon showed up, I said, look, kind of a best of all worlds that Macdonald came in, got the fix that he was after on defense, tried something for a year. It didn't work. Not really a lot of risk. 10-7. The team's fairly stacked. It's not a great division, even heading into next year. It just makes the end of this year for me, Brandon, that much better for okay, well, how are we gearing up for 2025, which the moment we got eliminated, it's all I care about anyway. So that's where I'm at, dude. You?
Well, and it gives us all something that even if we were upset about not making the playoffs, this is something now that's changed. Now going into the offseason, they're finding at least something and showing that they're looking to improve in some way. Free agency generally does some of that, although Seahawks don't tend to do free agency a whole lot. And then there's the draft. But this kind of adds that little bit of something that I think helps propel us into the offseason. And it gives us something to talk about, selfishly over the next couple weeks as they go into the coaching search. And we've got our live executive producer, Ryan 911, to thank for the $9.99 super chat. Go Hawks, Ryan.
Dude, he's the man. The dude's always with us, whether that's here, whether that's in the Discord. He's always with us, and we just want to thank him. And you're an amazing dude. And so we have a really cool thing strung together, guys. So we couldn't go live earlier today, so we were texting back and forth like emergency pod, and it was like, okay, just can't make it work for reasons A through Z. Cool. But this gave us a little bit of a time to take a breath and then to also gather ourselves with all right, what's the news mean for our Seahawks? What's the news mean for maybe current Seahawks that are, free agents, or the extensions we're talking about? How is that going to now play into the 2025 Seahawks? And I think most importantly for this stream, it gave us some time to put together quite a collection of candidates. And some of them are the ones that everybody's talking about. And I got to give credit to both you guys and some of the folks in our Discord. Some of the folks we're going to go through are maybe under the surface that have not bubbled up quite yet, that might be very interesting candidates that come from a particular tree that makes a lot of sense. So Adam, I know you sent me a honking list. Are you ready to help people, get into your mind a little bit?
Oh, for sure. And we can get into a lot of those candidates in. I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall as much as the next guy here. So a lot of these are just guesses or just guys that have had their names surface maybe for other offensive coordinator positions throughout the league, if they're somebody who's maybe not quite as established as some other guys, and then some names that you will definitely know. And Clint, did you want to start off with how you thought this was going to affect some of the free agents and that sort of thing before we kind of got into the list? Because I felt like that's kind of where you wanted to go.
Yeah, that, and also maybe just a recollection of when you guys were convinced. Now, Adam, I'm not sure you were convinced before the season started. You ended up being right with your preseason look that hey, chances are this is not going to work out. And you laid it out. You went through all the coaches who came from college and just say, hey, look, just percentages and what he likes to do with the football. He's saying one thing, but
are we giving Adam all the credit for this?
No,
I feel like I was about to a little bit of a tandem deal.
I was about to bounce it to you, Brandon. I was just giving the Godfathers of Seahawkers podcast the glory. So Brandon, how about we start with you then? When was the moment you were like? Because I know my moment. When was the moment for you? They're like, yeah, he's not coming back.
Gosh, I think probably around the bye week. Well, the game after the bye week, because the bye week was that opportunity to where you could say, okay, this gave them a little bit of extra time. And then coming out of the bye week, nothing changed. Like when that happened, I think for me, it said, because obviously going week to week, every single week we talk about it, how Mike Macdonald would come out of the game saying, oh, we really got to run the ball more. I really want this to be a physical style offense. Like, he talked about it every week, the style of offense and the style of team that he wanted to have. And then we kept looking and waiting for the offense to match some of that style that he kept reiterating in his press conferences and in his radio spots. And so when that didn't happen, then after the bye week, then I knew it was.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one for me too. And Macdonald certainly left breadcrumbs. You know, if you could look back in retrospect, there were plenty of breadcrumbs that he was leaving there to get back to the old lady's house with the Hansel and Gretel story. So, Adam, how about for you? We know you and Brandon were on it from Jump Street, but was there a moment in time during the year where you're like, that's it, that's the straw?
I think when I first had the inkling of like, oh no, I think I'm right on this, is around the Buffalo game. And then, as Brandon points out, you get past the bye week and, you see that very little has changed, and like, oh, they got under center 5 times instead of 2 times. Well, hooray. It was at that point where you're like, this can't align with what Mike wants. It's not what he's stated in any way. And it looks way too much like the Washington stuff. And this is probably not going to work. And then as you saw it just kind of devolve throughout the second half of the season, I can't remember what game that I finally was like, that's it. Like I've had enough. I want to say it was first Cardinals game or something like that. Like where it was just like, I'm over it, man. And Mike was clearly over it. This decision was made well before this last game. And one thing I'd like to give Mike a lot of credit for is one of the things we've learned about him in this season is that whether it's personnel in terms of players or coaches or whatever it is that he sees around him that's not fitting his vision, that's not working, he's not going to waste one freaking second on trying to make it work. It's like, this doesn't work. Let's cut bait and let's move on and let's get after it. And I think that was cool.
That will definitely
he could have made the decision sooner, I suppose. I know I highlighted one of the comments in chat earlier about some of the surprise that they did it so quickly and maybe didn't give it another year. And I think that kind of goes back to kind of what we talked about. It does feel like to really give someone, a realistic amount of time to evaluate them. Like 2 years is kind of necessary, but I think it was that component of the coach saying this is where we want to go and not really seeing any movement toward that direction that then I think shortened that timeline from 2 years down to a year. And then, I mean, the obvious point was in the Bears game then where it's pouring down rain and we are throwing the ball against a Bears defense that struggles against the run. And it's like, what are we doing here?
Right. After we also ran the ball down their throat whenever we wanted to start the game. Right. And then just stopped. So what you said earlier, Adam, about Macdonald's willingness to make that change and make that pivot, that'll go into my takes on how I do think it will impact the 25 Seahawks roster for sure. Because I think there's two peas in a pod, or one thing that really, it's like, for me, it's if it's good for the goose, good for the gander type thing. And I'll go into that. However, the moment for me, I am physically next to the Princetonian parlays, Sir Wilson Kahn, PNW Prop Star champion, at Lumen East Rutherford versus the Jets. We're staring down the goal line, and we have whatever that was, 7 or 8 attempts from the 3-yard line, 5-yard line, whatever it was. And we fail to get in, and we just throw the ball. Predictable run, throw the ball. And I'm looking at Wilson. I'm like, he's done. Like, there's no way he survives this. And for me, that was the moment, guys. It was just even a little late in the season, but it was just so apparent that he really struggled to be effective, especially in that deep red purple zone that Tom Brady likes to coin nowadays.
I think
100%.
I figured out what the deep red zone is. It's what we used to call scoring position.
Like
when
5
you
yards,
just get in
7 yard, like
No,
goal line offense.
goal to go.
Well, maybe I'm thinking of a different red zone, because I felt like when you'd get into field goal range, which is also scoring range, that they called that some kind of red zone too. But see, maybe I am mixing things up. That's why it's confusing. Not confusing is this $2 super chat from Dogzilla Monster. For most of the year, running backs were getting killed, and I think, well, part of that was, the offensive line not able to block super well. They were getting hit in the backfield quite a bit. But when you look at the stats and you see that they finished the season, what was it? It was in the bottom 5 in rushing attempts, but it was toward middle of the pack in terms of total yards per carry.
Yeah, YPC.
They're average NFL team. It's just that they didn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was the big problem for Mike. And then I think one of the other things that Brock kind of brought up, and he kind of said it out the side of his mouth, but I think it makes a lot of sense on their show this morning, and Brock and Salk, was just the idea that Grubb's voice and the way that he projects to his team is fairly gruff and straightforward, and maybe not the exact way that Mike wants things to be communicated to his players. And it certainly didn't get the best out of the offensive line. And then his scheme itself and the way that he went after attacking teams didn't help a weak offensive line at all. And we've talked about that ad nauseum, but at the end of the day, it didn't work. College guys don't work in the NFL if they've had no experience here. And so I'm looking forward to some candidates here that we're going to talk about. And I think all of these dudes have extensive NFL experience. And I feel like that's probably the way that John and Mike are going to go here.
Love it. So we do have on screen here too, of course, if you're out there on YouTube, first time we're going to mention it, we'd love for you to subscribe. youtube.com/Seahawkers podcast is a nifty QR code there. That should take you to the promised land as well. It means a lot to us. Brandon, we're storming to a big number. What's that number we're trying to chase, man?
5,000 subscribers out on YouTube. We can get there. It's not much more time. We'll get there soon.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. We'd like to get there as quickly as possible. Like, we got like 140 or something like that to go. So if you're new to this, hit subscribe. It's free. Hit like, drop the comments when the video's over. It all, just all juices it up. And hey, it's more Seahawks content, like you said earlier, Brandon, which I loved. It helps us turn the page faster too. Now we could just get into watching the Rams lose in the playoffs and then get on with our Seahawks lives, which I'm very excited about. Very, very excited about. Adam, you did mention earlier the impact on 2025. Let's call it the composition of the team. There's some big decisions that have to be made. I have a take on 2 particular players that I think matter a whole lot. I shared it in our Discord earlier today, at least for one of them. But for you guys, Adam, I'll kick it to you first. Do you see any learnings or things that you could project based on the fact that they did make this change? Even though we don't know who it's going to be yet, I think the players in the clubhouse understand what type Macdonald's going to go after.
Yeah, I think that this probably affects the offensive line the most, because I think that's probably where Mike was the most frustrated. Like, he wants a guy between Grubb and Huff, and we don't know what's going to happen with Huff yet. They seem to be tied at the hip, but he hasn't been released as far as I know yet.
Right.
And Mike did say in the news on on the radio show today that he's a Seahawk because Scott Huff's under contract as a Seahawk. So that's the way it is for now.
That's the way it is for now. But I think first and foremost, he's going to be looking for a guy, not necessarily who runs it more, maybe, but maybe more in the sense of they can get the most out of offensive line talent, because I do think John and maybe Mike too believes that Cross and Lucas and Olu are better players than what they showed. I mean, Tomlinson even took a step back this year compared to what he's produced in other places. So they're going to want to find somebody that gets the most out of that group, because Mike has talked about wanting to build the spine of the team. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be high on his list of priorities.
Love that.
Before we go on, I want to make sure and thank Scott Campbell Photography coming in with the $7.99 Australian in the super chat. Seahawks making moves one day after the season ended for them, promising times ahead, fix the O-line, and Geno will be MVP next year. Clinton, I know you like the sound of that because you had a little bit of a thought with this move that maybe this was a good sign for Geno Smith.
Yeah, I think, and thank you, Scott, so much, and the others that have already gave today and are always given to us, which is awesome. I think this is a extremely, I'll use the terminology correctly, boys, extremely bullish for the extend Geno camp. Couple of reasons. Well, Geno finishes strong, right? 4 touchdowns, over 70%. He's a 20th NFL quarterback of all time, hitting some minimums to be at 70% or higher. That's pretty amazing. He breaks his own franchise records, all that stuff. But this move in particular, what it signals for me is, if you have, it's a two-part thing here. If you are trying to attract an OC, and the OC says to you, okay, well, what are the plans with Geno Smith? And so there's 3 potential answers, right? We're going to let Geno go. Like this year, we're going to go try to find somebody this year, and we're going to let Geno walk. We're going to let Geno play out his last year. Then we'll start recruiting, fishing, putting lines in the ocean, trying to attract the Zach Wilsons of the world, et cetera, Justin Fields. Okay. Or, hey, we're going to extend Geno Smith through 2027 while we go get the quarterback of the future in place. I just think there's such a logical conclusion that anybody who's watching football is like, okay, Geno Smith is a very good NFL quarterback. And to attract a high-level OC, and likely one, Adam, to your point, and Brandon, a likely one that is experienced, then a major attraction is walking into a place where the quarterback is solved for. So I think this is a huge bullish trend that Geno Smith is going to get some sort of an extension. Maybe it's just 1 year. I'm betting it's probably through 2027, because then they'll get the sincere lowering of the cap this year and be able to spread the monies out and kick it for a couple of years. So I think it's pretty bullish for Geno Smith. So Adam, don't know if you're picking up my logic, but what do you think?
I think that's a line of logic that works for sure. And I do think that Geno, if he does become extended, will be out to about 27, just like you said, for the cap hit reasons and all of that good stuff. But I don't know that this really shows exactly the direction of the team for this offseason at all yet, in terms of, is this going to be more of tear it down and get Mike's dudes in there, or is it, double down with Geno and crew and really get after it? I think one of the things that I gleaned from his coaching show today is that he was very proud of getting to 10-7 rather than being 9-8, and getting to 10-7, I think, does put a feather in the cap of your argument of he would like to kind of continue forward with a lot of these players, but I think it's pretty unknown to this point still.
Okay. Brandon, are you buying? I'm mixing the Kool-Aid here. Are you taking a sip? What are you doing?
I think that your logic makes sense if they already hired a veteran offensive coordinator, but they haven't done that yet. So I think that if you are, once you start seeing who they're bringing in to interview, then that might tell us the direction that they might be looking to go. But I would think that if they go with a guy with no offensive coordinator experience who's on his way up, then it's less likely. Whereas I think that you're right, that if they were to bring in somebody more seasoned, and we'll get into some of those candidates, that then it makes more sense then that they would be sticking with Geno and looking to make a run short term rather than looking at more of a 4 or 5 year out picture.
Let's push those chips in, baby. So then how about you, Brandon? Any particular players or structure do you think it's too early because of those reasons, or are there any gleanings on the structure of the team that you could profess?
I think that no, I think it's still a little bit too early to start looking at structure a team. I think that this hire is going to maybe inform a lot of these decisions going forward.
Okay. All right. Well, I know we got a lot to get to still. So why don't we rotate over onto just reminding folks of the next one, that next Monday Night Football, we have the Hate Watch 25, which Brandon, all the credit goes to you because that is your title. I love it. So we got the Suck It Rams and Skull party that's going to be going on. Our only request is share it with all your 12s that are friends. And even if they're Vikings fans, whatever, it's all good. Anybody who wants to root against the stupid Rams will be welcome. We're going to come on about 10 minutes, guys, before kickoff. That feel about good?
We can have that production meeting after the show, but and maybe we needed to have a meeting before this graphic was put together because I'm missing McVay with the poop emoji hat. But
we didn't win last. I used it last time and it didn't win. So
okay. That's good. You're changing it up. That's smart.
I was like, Van Ginkel lays some wood. He's fun to look at. And there was discussion about Chris Hemsworth in our Discord. I'm like, well, this is the closest thing we got.
There we go. Thanks to Dougzilla Monster for the $2 super chat. Fans are going to freak at the number they paid Geno. It might look freakish if you're looking at the overall contract number, especially those early numbers that come out. If they do decide to extend them long term, then yeah, I think that number would probably be a big number that people would freak out by. But how it's structured and the point at which that they could decide to get out of that contract too, it might be that might work into it too. So we'll break all that down once it happens, but we are going to break down our usual suspects for offensive coordinator and then get into maybe some of the suspects that are a little bit less likely. Adam and I, we talked about it a little bit after the game, just the type of offensive coordinator, and we've talked about it even when they were searching for an offensive coordinator, the type of guy that we think would be important to go alongside Mike Macdonald, and having a lot of experience who can just take over the offensive side of the ball. It makes a lot of sense, right?
It does. And this was something I was banging the table for when they hired Grubb. I was like, get some dude with a bunch of experience, preferably maybe a former head coach. And Hawkblogger put out a great article called "One Head Coach May Not Be Enough," and basically the crux of it is this is a quote from the article: the last 10 Super Bowl winners have all had staffs with at least 2 coaches who had prior experience as a head coach. And if you're playing the what's more likely game, which is what I was doing with Grubb when he was hired, is like, hey, it hasn't worked out pretty much ever for any of these guys, so it is more likely that he's going to fail. To get a guy with some head coaching experience, that means you're probably more likely to be able to get to the Super Bowl just based on historical trends. This is so Doug Pederson fits into this camp. Obviously, the former head coach of both the Jags and the Eagles. He was, under Andy Reid, and we all think Andy Reid's a offensive maestro, no doubt about that. But not of all of them, because Brandon texted us the list of former offensive head coaches that were, in the last few years. And the list is a little bleak but Doug Pederson himself, that'd be a no-go for me, because I honestly believe that his success when he was with Philadelphia was more because of Frank Reich when he was his OC. I think most of those ideas and most of that offense came from him. And then also with Shane Steichen after that. So I'm not sure that Doug Pederson is the type of architect that I'm looking for. Plus a guy in Jacksonville, by all accounts, and in Philadelphia, who was known as just more of a delegator than getting in there and actually creating schemes and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of out on Pederson.
I'm interested. I'd like to know where he is, because a lot of times you see these guys who have done multiple head coaching stints and then they don't really want to go back. They either want to be a head coach or they want to take some time off. They want to go into broadcasting. We see that oftentimes from a lot of head coaches. The thing that I do like about Pederson, though, is that you see a lot of these guys who are head coaches that, they are at a place for 1 year, 2 years, and then they're moving on. And he was with 3 teams over a period from 2009 to 2024. So a really, 15 years worth of time. And he was with the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Jags, and that was it. And so that, to me, it shows like he's not wearing anybody thin in terms of his personality.
For me, in general, he's really middle of the pack for me at this point, like a square C. I wouldn't be extremely excited if it was him, and I wouldn't be, searching for the nearest high roof if it was him either. So all that being said, with so many other candidates out there right now, for me, he's a current pass. I think there's other better dudes to look at. He is one that fits that bill. Head coach, OC experience, decades of NFL experience. That's cool. We're going to look at some other guys right now that I think, Adam, you pointed out. I'll jump in because you already mentioned him. I'll kick it off with Frank Reich. So Frank Reich, little bit more senior, right? So aged 63 years, but I know, right? Maybe just a bit wiser. Remembering, the younger folks too. It's like they might know Frank Reich, the coach. They might forget. When I was creating these slides, I was like, it's pretty cool if they have specific NFL experience. I mean, he was a QB for 13 years, a lot of that time with Buffalo and then some others. And of course, he had some, miraculous plays with the Bills, backing up Jim Kelly a couple of times. But then a really strong track record with the Chargers, Eagles, and then as a head coach also with the Colts and Panthers. You were mentioning Hawk Blogger before, Adam, about his great article. Another good nugget that came out from other folks was Maddie and Griff, when they were looking at Reich the year previous. You were one of the people, both of y'all were one of the people that were like, hey, Frank Reich should be considered. And people were throwing tomatoes at you. Like, you kidding me? Frank Reich, you got to be kidding me. And at the same exact time, Maddie and Griff from the Overload podcast, they were looking at third down numbers. Frank Reich, all Frank Reich teams, all of them were like always top 5 in third down conversion percentage. So if I'm looking at Mike Macdonald being like, Michigan, what does he like to do? Play great defense, convert on third down. And you get the experience factor. So Frank Reich for me is quite high up there. Wasn't so much last year. It was like, kind of old hat. Now I'm like, ooh, maybe there's more depth there. So Brandon, Frank Reich, what do you think?
I think this would be an interesting choice. The age part of it doesn't bother me at all. Also, similar to Doug Pederson, I mean, he meets a lot of those similarities. Doug Pederson, also an NFL quarterback. And also Reich was a guy who, apart from 1 year stints with the Panthers, which, I think that's what got people ruffled up, was the fact that he was coming off as a failure as a head coach. But I think we're looking at that as kind of a positive point, because one, you're not going to have to, if we're looking at this as a 2-3 year window, the big concern is that if you're going with some of these young offensive coordinators, as soon as they have success, somebody's going to be poaching them and taking them for a head coaching job. A lot of times with these older failed head coaches, other teams are going, well, we want somebody younger who we know is going to be with the team for 5+ years. And so we're looking younger, and the fan base doesn't really support some of the failure at head coach. So generally, I think that, and when you go down the list of teams that have had success, a lot of times it's those guys that they were amazing coordinators, and that's the reason why they got their head coaching job, and they just weren't head coach type dudes. And once they come back to what they're really good at, which is coordinating offenses or coordinating defenses, they have a ton of success, and you see team success to go along with it.
100%. And that kind of lays out the Wade Phillips model when he was paired with McVay, right? But just on the defensive side of the ball, you get an older coach who maybe is not quite as attractive to other teams in terms of them picking them up and turning him into another head coach. And, the idea of Frank Reich, the head coach failure, is hilarious to me. Like, you think about He goes to Carolina. He's not even there for a full season. He gets fired in season because he looks at that crazy ass owner and says, Bryce Young sucks balls, and I didn't want him in the first place. And of course, that wasn't going to be in alignment with the owner, and they jettison him. Does that make him a failure? I don't think so. I think he recognized that the guy can't really play all that well. I know he had a nice little run at the second half of the season, but I'm still kind of out on Bryce Young. So you look at that and you go, well, okay, that doesn't seem like a failure to me. Then his stint with the Colts. People often forget he had 1 year of Andrew Luck. When he signed up for that job, he was supposed to have Andrew Luck. He had 1 year of Andrew Luck, goes to the playoffs. He unexpectedly retires. Then they bring in Jacoby Brissett to just tread water for a year. They have a winning record with Jacoby Brissett, if I remember correctly. And then I could be wrong on that though. And then they bring in Phil Rivers, go to the playoffs. Phil Rivers, the corpse of Phil Rivers, right? It was over for him. He gets him close to into the playoffs, and they're one and done. And then the bright idea is, well, we'll go and we'll get was it Wentz or Matt Ryan next? I think it was Wentz next. Yeah, It was Wentz. And because they're like, hey, you got the best out of him in Philly. Wentz came in and they were within a game of the playoffs. They just barely missed the playoffs with Carson freaking Wentz. We just watched what happened with the Chiefs with Wentz yesterday, and it was abysmal. He got the best out of that dude, who's by all accounts tough to deal with behind the scenes. And then they give him not even the corpse, the rotting corpse of Matt Ryan. And of course that didn't work because his arm had fallen off. And then we say, well, Frank Reich's a failure. That seems crazy to me. Frank Reich knows how to run the football. Frank Reich knows how to put together a professional NFL offense. Frank Reich won a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator. And as Brandon pointed out, maybe not a guy that's going to get poached right away. This is candidate number one for me. And it might just be because I have a soft spot for the guy as a young child, watching him lead the comeback against the Oilers, the biggest comeback in playoff history. I remember crying on the couch at halftime. My dad walks by and is like, why are you still watching this? I was like, because I want to see it. And they won. And so I love the dude. And the one concern I have is I don't know personality wise how he fits with the culture that Mike's trying to create here. But, that's something that they would have to hash out between themselves.
Yeah, and I tried to look for a lot of connections between Reich and other people within the staff. And I because that's one of the things that I try and find, because it is such a relationship style business. Like a lot of these guys I think are going to be brought in because they might know or be connected to somebody else on the staff. And so they have some kind of connection. And I don't, there's probably a connection there somewhere. I didn't dig quite deep.
But Mike has shown that he doesn't give a crap about that. The way he assembled this staff. Yeah. Not a lot of connective tissue between these guys.
Nice. Well, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Reich as well. Definitely in my top tier. The next one we're going to get to, this was a great text from Brandon today saying, hey, this guy's not on anybody's list. And it wasn't like Brandon. It wasn't like you were going to be some contrarian. You were just like, there's a guy out there no one's talking about who's been very successful, all the experience, had his own little adventure recently. And you're about to tell us all about him, because I bet you most people don't know the story of the Dirk. So please
remember, right? He brought up the name and I was like, yeah, Dirk Koetter. He's like with Tampa or something. Like, right. Yeah. So this will be fun.
Well, so this is how I got to Dirk Koetter. I went to, because I like to look for connections, I started going to Leslie Frazier coworkers and went down the list that, when he was in Minnesota, Darrell Bevell was the Vikings OC when Frazier was the DC. Eric Bieniemy was the running backs coach. And so there's some familiarity there just of people that he knows. We might get to some of these other names too, but then when Frazier was the defensive coordinator with the Bucs, Dirk Koetter was the Bucs offensive coordinator. He, before that, speaking of things that might make you cry, he was the offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons, the Falcons team that won it late in 2012 against our Seahawks in the playoffs. It was Dirk Koetter and that Matt Ryan team that kicked us out of the playoffs. But it was that success that he had in Atlanta. Then that got him, I think, elevated, and then ended up getting him the Bucs head coaching job, and so he has experience as a head coaching job. Now, after he got fired with the Bucs, he went on to college. So we would be hiring a college offensive coordinator, Adam, who had been coordinating the Boise State Broncos and the runner-up of the Heisman Trophy winner, Ashton Jeanty. So this man knows how to run the ball. He's been doing it with Ashton Jeanty at Boise State, and he's going to be probably the top running back off the board come draft time this year.
Oh, yeah. Jeanty's phenomenal, and Koetter could recognize that talent. And I think that Jeanty reminds me a lot of K9, honestly, and somebody who might know how to get the best out of a talented back like that. In terms of him being like a college guy, like he's primarily an NFL dude, right? So I have
know.
no
I just
problems
said that
with
to dig at you a little
bit.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Pete went back to college, but he's not necessarily a college guy. I hadn't thought about this name at all, and he did have success with the Falcons and the Bucs as OC, got him to the playoffs. Not as quite as successful as head coach there when he was with Tampa, but a little time with Boise. Maybe he found some of the little innovative tricks within college football that you could bring and kind of have some time away from the NFL game too, to really formulate your plan. Now he stepped away from Boise State because he's sick of the NIL crap, it sounds like. And
he retired via Facebook post.
That's the most boomer thing ever. Congratulations, Dirk Koetter. I love it. Now 65, even a little bit older than Reich. This would be a guy, if they brought him in, I don't know that I'd do a backflip, but I also wouldn't be pissed about it by any stretch. How about you, Clinton?
Yeah, I mean, the Thornton Mellon of the group going back to school here. It's one of those dudes that just was out of my brain. And then I get the text message and I go back and I'm on his Wikipedia page. I'm like, oh yeah, like look at all this litany of experience. It is interesting to me that he really hugged the Southeast really hard for a while there. He was like Jacksonville, Tampa, Atlanta. He must have just liked the sunshine. But I'm inspired that he was like, after all of that, you know what? I'm going to go for the relaxation in Idaho. So he also, even geographically, I know that might sound trite, and I'm saying it a little bit in jest, but there's a seriousness to it too. It's like, well, the guy moved to Idaho. So, packing up and getting to the PNW from Idaho, it's practically the same thing. It's part of it in many ways. So that actually leans towards, well, he's open to that. If his last stint was Florida State, I would say, guys, there's a pattern we're missing. He wants to stay down there. That's not the case. So intriguing. And I thought a really, really cool one that Brandon, you dug out. And man, it's, and look, you could love the blue turf and watch Boise State and know they like to run the crap out of the ball. So could be cool.
This next one, Jim Caldwell. This was a name that I thought of initially when I saw that he was 69, when I saw that he's a senior assistant at Carolina at this point. It kind of leads me to believe that he might be on the downside of his career, but also he fits all the criteria. He has some connection, and obviously coaching through the Ravens. I think the connections might be there. He may not be up for the task is my only concern.
I'll hop in real quick on Caldwell. So the reason I wanted to put him in here was twofold. One is the connection to the Ravens and then back to the Harbaugh tree, because I do think we said this when Macdonald was hired. I was like, guys, he's way more Harbaugh than he is the Carroll. Let's put it that way. And I think that's proving out to be true. Not to say it's good, bad, ugly, indifferent, just factually where I thought the guy was. So maybe at 69, he's going to retire. I don't know, maybe so, but he OC'd the Ravens to a Super Bowl. And then he takes the Colts to the Super Bowl they lost versus the Saints. And then he takes a Lions team that was not a great team. And he has successful years there too, and gets them in the playoffs before they had that real nose that they had before they got good again. So he's had success upon success upon success, and figured it was at least worth a flyer to throw in there. So Adam, don't know where you're at with Big Jim.
Yeah. So a couple problems that I have with Jim Caldwell. One is that he has like little flurries of success, and then it seems to peter out really quickly. And that little stretch that he had of success there with the Lions was brief. And of course, with the Colts, I'm not going to give anybody. I mean, Peyton Manning made Adam Gase look good, right? So, I'm not going to give Jim a ton
I think
of
Adam
credit
Gase
there.
is available.
Yeah, he is, and he can stay that way.
Yeah, readily.
Yeah, absolutely. At that point, the other thing is listening to Jim Caldwell talk. I can't think of a more uninspiring human in the world. And so for me, a little lower on the list for me, for sure, maybe closer to the bottom. And also too, I do think he's probably closer to entering the Leslie Frazier part of his career where, yeah, I'm around and I've seen a lot of things and I'm here to bounce stuff off of. And honestly, that's where I'd want to be if I was approaching 70.
Yeah, totally fair on that one. So guys, I put this together on just this was the list of, we were bouncing back some text throughout today. And this was the rest of some, these are dudes who fit the bill, the early bill of their offensive coordinators who happen to be head coaches. And I think you have a pretty wide spectrum of interesting candidates here. I don't know how you'd rank them all, but for me, I'm not really thrilled by any of these per se. Brandon, is there one or two here that you're like, I would entertain one of these that's just a little better for you?
There's two names that I would entertain off this list. One would be Jason Garrett, which I don't know if he would. I mean, like, he has a nice TV job. I'm not super excited, but I'd be intrigued somewhat. The other guy that I think makes the most sense of the group would be Anthony Lynn, being a former running back, being offensive coordinator, that then moved up to head coach. I think Lynn would make some sense among these names.
Adam, I saw your visceral reaction to Garrett, at least. So why don't you take the mic?
Yeah, the clapper can stay on TV. I don't.
Oh no, that was all they needed.
Why would it do that? It'll come back. It's apparently what this does now. So yeah, I don't want the clapper anywhere around this franchise. The picture will come back, folks. Now, in terms of any names that stick out where I'd be slightly interested in, I think Jay Gruden's a good offensive mind and has kind of the toughness and mentality that I think you want from your OC. And then honestly, Freddie Kitchens was a disaster as a head coach. Disaster. But he actually got a great year out of Baker Mayfield and got the Browns to the playoffs. That's how he ends up being head coach. So Kitchens and Gruden, those would be the two that stand off for me. If we just want somebody that we can really enjoy being around, then let's bring in Nathaniel Hackett. He can grow another little Bond villain goatee. It'll be a great time. We could do that.
Yeah, he won't take time
Clint,
out.
I do have to ask, why the picture? What's going on here?
Well, that's from Dudes Where's My Car? Right?
Okay.
Or Dude Where's My Car? And these are just dudes.
Okay, I'm glad I asked. Okay, because I don't think anybody else would have made that connection.
It was not making that connection necessarily, but it does kind of make me want to be part of a cult.
If you like the movie Dude Where's My Car, hit the like button right now because Clinton's hooking you up.
And for me, real quick, I think the Jason Garrett thing, it's at least, I mean, look, I don't think he has a shot really, but we're having a fun discussion hours after news, right? As much as I don't want him as a head coach, I could remember what those Cowboys teams did and did well. They ran the ball a lot, and then they get under center and they play action. They did, and they use the tight end and they open things up. So my memories of Garrett as an offensive mind, I didn't like the way he game managed, and he was very, very conservative. I remember him being super conservative, and that I would not want, especially as this rotates to 2025. But I do remember, I guess, kind of fondly him running the ball quite okay. And the Freddie Kitchens part, it was a fun year when Baker went off, right? It was a glimpse of, hey, he could be something. And then the Browns went off and said, well, we want adults in the room. And they kicked Baker out of Cleveland, and they've been absolute trash since. So, but Kitchens got the best of him until a little bit later in his career, it seems.
Oh, what does that do for me? It makes me want to find a bucket fight to puke in. You talk about a guy that doesn't understand time of possession in running the football. That's Chip freaking Kelly. That's and on top of that, that dude's ego is larger than the West Coast.
Yeah, for those listening in, the comment that I posted up on screen is, if we're just throwing random names of dudes who are old and failed head coaches, what does the name Chip Kelly do for you? It does not make Adam very happy. So and that would be a guy who would be coming from college too, and he said that's where he's had his success.
And I will say to those that have hung with us so far, and there's lots of folks out there watching live, again, please subscribe, like, and all that. Please do all those things. We're going to rotate into some of the younger. Now we're going to get into the folks that maybe are not as experienced, or just simply are not as experienced in the ways that those gentlemen were. So younger, and maybe a bit more sought after in the 2025 era. And we're starting off with Mike Kafka, who, of course, was brought in kind of heavily courted last year. And the Giants played a little chess and were like, hey, no, you can't have him. He's going to get a chance to be the play caller. And then as things kind of went a little sideways, Brian Dable, who was retained today, or said he'd be retained today by Giants ownership, he took the play calling abilities back away from Kafka. So he's young. He's got some interesting pedigree, tied back to the Chiefs as well, and working with Mahomes under Reed. He's only 37 years old, and he's an OC, but really an OC in name only. He does not call the plays for the New York Football Giants. Brandon, Mike Kafka, year 2 of interest. Where's your interest?
Well, the Giants, they would have to agree to give him up unless the Seahawks are willing to give him extra duties that go beyond just being offensive coordinator, because it still ends up being a lateral move. I think we'll probably end up getting into that with some of these guys too, who are listed as offensive coordinator, but just keep in mind that they would have to do something extra, or have a coach who's willing to give that up and allow them to go on to a place that would allow them to call plays. It was interesting that they brought him in for head coach. It does lead me to believe that there is interest then at offensive coordinator potentially. And so I think that's why this needs to be considered, that they would still be interested, but whether or not they could make it happen. And I know that there's other guys I'd be interested in, but based on his experience working with Mahomes in Kansas City, it does make some sense.
Well, the good news for Mike Kafka is if this whole NFL thing doesn't work out for him, he can just be a stock model for middle-aged white dad. That's what I got from his photo here. Just looks like just a random dad. But at the end of the day with Kafka, what it is for me is, where has been the success, like calling plays or just within his duties, kind of getting demoted in New York, kind of that rubs me the wrong way a little bit, but doesn't totally turn me off. QB coach for the Chiefs, like, what's that? Getting Patrick Mahomes his coffee? Like, what are you going to tell Patrick Mahomes? Andy Reid's kind of got that on lockdown. This isn't a never guy for me at all, but probably more like a 5. He's kind of like a meh. Yeah.
I think it was younger Mahomes. I think that era was like 2018. I understand it's Patrick Mahomes. However, in 2018, maybe there was things, but at the same time, in 2018, Kafka is like 29 years old, like really a really young guy, 30 years old. Sure. The job he did with the Giants, I think he's there for the Giants team, I believe, whether he's OC or not, but I think he was there when they got that playoff win with Daniel Jones as quarterback versus the Vikings, which is going on, 2.5 years ago now, right? Coming up. So 2 full seasons ago. So, and that was Dable's first year, right? So I think he's there for that. I have to go check that or have someone check that. That's something. So that team was cooking a bit. I saw in the comments the idea that, like, okay, so he got play calling duties taken away from him in New York. Like, geez, how bad could it be? I hear you. It's a name that people seem to like. I don't know him too much more personally than that. But Brandon, to your point, they liked him. They were bringing him in as a head coach candidate last year. Maybe it's also just partially that Schneider was on a full-on youth kick. And Kafka was the OC equivalent to McDonald as the DC, and McDonald was the one, and Kafka might have been, the two on the OC on the offensive side. We'll see. But there's other dudes out there. We're rotating over to Tanner. I think it's Engstrand is how you say it. Engstrand from the Detroit Lions, aged 42 years. Some pretty cool experience. I'll rattle through that quickly and pass it to one of y'all. The USD that's on screen on YouTube, that's not US dollar. That's University of San Diego for those out there, which of course means he was the offensive coordinator while he met Jim Harbaugh. He was like assistant, like real low level when Jim Harbaugh took that job at USD. So he got into the Harbaugh tree in a really kind of unconventional way. Harbaugh went like 04, 05 or something like that, USD, and then he took the job at Stanford, and then he went on to Michigan, right? And then, got his butt back to the NFL. So he meets Harbaugh, has some success, goes off to the XFL and is the OC for I think it's the DC Defenders. So in the Beltway down there, then tight ends coach for the Lions, and the PGC is pass game coordinator. I just couldn't put all that on screen. So when you see PGC, that's what that is for the Lions. And he is supposedly next in line for Ben Johnson, the OC of the Lions. They're tearing it up, and he is very likely to become a head coach and get paid a lot of money, meaning Johnson. So he's supposed to be the heir apparent that just takes it over. Now, I guess, Brandon, I'll kick it to you quickly. Do you think that's the fate? Tanner is just going to be the next OC of the Lions, and that's that?
I don't know if it's necessarily that's that, because I think that there's going to be a lot of other teams doing the similar type of thing and going, okay, well, we might not be able to get Ben Johnson because he's going to be a head coach. So let's go ahead and make an offer for offensive coordinator around that same time and start doing interviews and trying to get him away from Detroit, because you don't know with some of these people who they're tied to. He may want to go and then be offensive coordinator wherever Ben Johnson goes. That's tends to be how some of these things work out. But this, to me, is how you go from being a college offensive coach to a professional offensive coach. Yes. You put in all your time in college, and then you do. He actually had the XFL thing in between. Yep. But then he started off as an offensive assistant in Detroit, and now he's worked his way up and into that conversation now where he's being considered as offensive coordinator.
I like the pedigree. Like that he's rubbed shoulders with Ben Johnson, who's obviously a very bright offensive mind. I like the way that Ben Johnson gets after running the rock, as well as using play action and being under center and being able to utilize all that in the league. But what it boils down to is this comment from Marlon for me. I think he will be good, but my worry is that if he does well, he will only get 1 to 2 years before he becomes HC. And that really is my biggest concern with him, because if he does leave Detroit, which I think is probably a slim chance. I think Ben Johnson, he turned down positions last year. He's not going to do that 2 years in a row. I think Ben's probably gone. But let's say you did snag Tanner, coming from the pedigree of the Lions and being around Ben Johnson, has success in Seattle, let's say for a year or two, he's going to be one of the dudes at the very tip-top list of everybody's head coaching candidates. So now, does that mean you should shy away from the guy because he could be hyper successful and you only have him for a short period?
No,
maybe not. Right.
So, right.
Yeah. That's my concern though.
No, you run the dagger concepts all day long, and you turn JSN into Amon Ra, and you get the most out of DK, and you treat Geno the right way, and he puts up, Goff-like stats, and K9 looks like Jahmyr Gibbs. And where do we sign? Right. We'd be happy with all those outcomes. Let me throw one thing out there that could put a wrench into Tanner staying in Detroit. This is the way I see this. If Detroit were to win the Super Bowl, and as it is right now, the 1 seed in the NFC, who has made it through all these injuries, just these, especially in the defensive side, it's still a long road and it's still hard to do it. However, I think the betting favorite right now is the Detroit Lions to win it. If Detroit wins the whole thing and Ben Johnson leaves, does Tanner want to step in as the OC in Detroit, where they just finished the job? I don't know. The answer might be, you know what? Let me go somewhere else where I could go carve more of my own path. That could be a real thing that ends up impacting his decision. That's the way I see it.
Well, I don't know that that would be something that would turn you off. Like for me, if you're Tanner and like you guys win the Super Bowl, Ben Johnson leaves, like what better situation could you go into? Like that,
I don't know. I think that might be the worst situation. It's such a low.
If you're afraid of following success, then you probably don't belong in the league.
It's not. Okay. I could absorb that and understand that. However, they've reached the pinnacle, right? And so it's if you do not repeat, you will be seen as a failure, most likely. Unless it's a complete fall apart by the defense, right? Which I don't think that kind of football is going to fall apart in a single season with the head coach they have and Aaron Glenn. So that's all. It's just like he could maybe go somewhere else where they haven't had that success or haven't had it for a while, and he gets to have his own journey and gets the glory. And even if he wins it a second time, you did it with Ben Johnson's team. We've seen it before with like Seifert with the 49ers as a good example from a head coach position.
Yeah, I could see that. It does give someone an opportunity then to go do it somewhere and completely separate themselves from the previous situation. And so maybe there would be something to that, maybe a chance there. He didn't have any connections that I could see necessarily to current coaching staff. And I keep going back to that because Klint Kubiak was a guy that was connected once again to Leslie Frazier. He was actually quality control coach with the Bucs when Frazier was, head coach. Where was Frazier head coach? Was it
Buffalo?
Buffalo. Yeah. So he was a quality control coach on that offensive staff. So there's a minor connection there, but here he is with the New Orleans Saints, the Saints looking for a head coach. And once the head coach comes into the new staff, he may not want Klint Kubiak to be the offensive coordinator, which would open him up then to be available to the Seahawks.
Very true.
Pedigree, right? So coming from just the dad being super famous and super successful, and it's a youth movement guy. Now, I think the Saints have done. I like how they use some of their players. Obviously, they've had Kamara for quite a while there. When Carr is healthy, and like they'll extend the ball. They'll throw the ball quite deep. They will stretch the field. He's not afraid to do that, and also mixes in lot of touches for Kamara. Now that might end up being, 15 to 18 carries and 6 to 9 receptions out of the backfield, but he also has Kamara. But I really think he understands, much in the way that Kubiak did back in his day, how to get running backs involved in volume, which I am attracted to that. I think it's a good idea. Adam, for me, he spells his name funny, and I can't get behind that first K.
Well, I enjoy the idea of baby cubes. So one of the things that I actually really enjoyed the way that his father coached, and obviously with the heart conditions, he decided that he didn't want to continue with that. But it's a lot of zone running scheme, and then a lot of under center, a lot of play action, a lot of stuff that comes from the OG Shanahan tree.
Yeah.
And so that actually trickles down here. So with good old line play, a pedigree that comes from a coach that it didn't matter the offensive line, it didn't matter the running back, they were always productive. That appeals to me.
Appealing name, another name on the list, Press Taylor Clinton. You have him on here, a younger guy, 36, OC for the Jaguars. So again, his coach let go with Doug Pederson, should be available, and a passing game coordinator with the Eagles previously. What can you tell us about Press Taylor?
I'm going to pass this microphone to Adam. Adam sent me a list, and he had 3 guys at the top and a line and the rest of his guys. The third guy was Sir Press Taylor. What do we need to know about Press Taylor, Adam?
That I was screwing up my list and it was just doodles, so I wouldn't worry about like where it was on there and whether he was above or below the line. That really was inconsequential. Basically the biggest thing for Press is that he's Zach Taylor of the Bengals brother, right? And you got to think that they have similar offensive philosophies and an offensive mind. The offense in Jacksonville was uninspiring. So I don't know. He fits the youth movement part. I'm pressed to get on board with Press.
Major red flag for me with Press is that he was born in Norman, Oklahoma. He went to high school in Norman, Oklahoma, and then he decided to go to Butler Community College in Colorado. So, like, how do you grow up in Norman and not go to University of Oklahoma? That makes no sense.
Oh, you want to be by mountains where it's
I was going to say, yeah, he wants mountains and maybe whatever, just a different lifestyle right out there. So Colorado's beautiful.
He's a mountain guy.
He's a mountain guy. Sense. This guy's interesting. We got Brian Fleury, age 45, and I like him because he looks like a supervillain in many ways. But I also, the Dan Campbell path of being a tight end and then, having incredible success, and also just something about tight end coaches. So his current gig right now, he is the tight end coach of the 49ers. He was the quality control defensive guy for the 49ers, and he also coached linebackers for the Browns. So an interesting NFL career. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list of everything they've done to get to now. It's just kind of the most recent two or three things to kind of give them a little encapsulation of how they got to now. And I don't know much about him, but I'm intrigued. And Brandon, not sure if you have anything on Mr. Fleury, but an interesting fella for sure, and maybe a dark horse.
It would definitely be a dark horse because you're going to a guy who has never called NFL plays. I mean, unless he got some time with Shanahan, but he has a variety of experience being a quality control coach with the Bills and going back to some coaching experience in college. And then having defensive experience with the Browns, then defensive quality control experience with the Niners. And then, he's been with the Niners here since 2019. So it would kind of be coaching from that Niners staff. But having someone who had never called plays, at least if he were I guess he was a quarterback in high school. So he has called plays in that regard.
He's kind of an Iron Man on both sides of the ball, Adam. So anything piquing your interest about Mr. Fleury?
He was a college QB for Towson. So that's something to kind of take into account. This is actually one of my more favorite, if you're taking a swing at an unknown guy candidate, I'd love the fact that he's had time and experience on the other side of the ball, has gone and studied under Shanahan, who, as much as I can't stand Kyle Shanahan, he's a hell of an offensive mind and does know how to run the football in multiple ways and attack the middle of the field and play on time and make things quarterback friendly. I think that with his defensive background, this could be a guy that could meld well with somebody like Coach Mike and to be able to get on the same page, philosophically speaking, in a way that maybe he wasn't able to get on the same page with Grubb. He was interviewed by the Browns for an offensive coordinator position last year. So somebody that has been considered for other jobs. I think if you hired Brian Fleury, we'd be in for a flurry of touchdowns.
I love that. I think part of this too is also just getting names out there that maybe you weren't thinking about yet, and also seeing a face to it. Brandon, before we get to Mr. Jake, I do want to ask you and anybody in the chat, Adam already knows because I talked to him about it today, does anybody out there know who is the most famous NFL player who went to and graduated from Towson? Towson's down in Baltimore, right? It's basically right next to University of Maryland, UMBC, Towson, right there in Baltimore. Do you know who the most famous NFL player is from Towson?
I don't think I do. I actually lived near Towson for a little bit, so that it's a town that I'm familiar with. Which, it's like high school plus probably in terms of their college team. But who is it?
I think it's the Towson Tigers, I believe, right? Is their name.
Mascot, yeah.
Yeah, the mascot, thank you. And also shout out Johnny Parmesan. This is his alma mater, one of my best buds in the world. It is Dave Meggett, the famed, little man from the New York Giants back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Late
Yeah.
80s. Yep. Mhm.
Look at that little Meggett go. So Dave Meggett, the pride of Towson. So there we have it.
I also enjoy this comment by Flocktimus Prime saying that Brian Fleury looks like the love child of Ewan McGregor and J.K. Simmons. So yes, for those of you audio only who don't have that picture of Brian Fleury in your mind, combination of Ewan McGregor, J.K. Simmons, very appropriate.
That means he would be awesome.
He would be.
Yeah.
And he'd have a great voice. There's no way if that love child existed, the voice alone would be, just a really, really powerful one.
He might be too distracted about going after Spider-Man. That would be my one concern. Jake Peetz, also in consideration, and a guy who is currently on our Seahawks as the passing game coordinator. He did come from that McVay tree as pass game specialist with the Rams. We've heard some praise from Mike Macdonald about Peetz during some of his comments here leading up to it. And I feel like this slide is in here in an obligatory way because it should be considered. But I know for me, Adam, we've talked about this a little bit. I'm out on Jake Peetz for just the fact that if he were, I will repeat it again, if he were influential enough to be able to change how this offense was run, just sitting right next to Ryan Grubb in that offensive coordinator box, I feel like we should have seen some movement throughout the team to do what Coach Mike wanted to do. Like, how do you not elbow your boss and say, hey, didn't the boss say we should do this like once or twice throughout the game? Maybe we should consider this. I'm not opposed to him continuing to be on the team, and maybe he can be groomed to be like, say they do bring in a guy who we're concerned that, he might end up having too much success and getting poached away. Well, then maybe Peetz can be that guy that can take over and like down the road and after the fact. But I think it's a little bit too early for me right now.
Yeah, this is one that I'm a little less interested in. And maybe this is just PTSD talking, Seahawks PTSD. The idea of having somebody who was at all connected with last year's offense just like is a big fat nope. Also, the last time that we tried to pluck off of the McVay tree, we ended up with Shane Waldron. In the counter to that being that, well, look at all the other guys that have come out of the McVay tree and have had success. And so maybe just, being bitten once, maybe you shouldn't be twice shy. So I recognize that kind of my aversion to this is based a lot in just the failures of the past, and maybe that's short-sighted. But it would offer a bit of continuity, so I could see that. I still would be a little more excited for somebody with more experience, especially some of, like we said earlier, maybe former head coaches. So that's kind of where I stand on it. I wouldn't be mad.
Yeah, a couple of things for me. We have, it's on screen, the OC of the LSU Tigers, but we're not talking about a very successful Tigers team. I think they went 7-6 the year that he was OC. And of course, college, you could have tremendous swings, that's just the way college football goes. And less so now with the transfer portal, but this predates that. And the other thing that we mentioned earlier, which I do think matters, is that Macdonald left a good amount of breadcrumbs, and meaning the breadcrumbs that Grubb was not long for this team. Along with those breadcrumbs would be name drops where Macdonald talked about Peetz more than a handful of times. And so he does have some shining to him. Now, how far that goes, guys, I don't know. And I don't know what Jake Peetz will bring. So it's a bit of a mystery box. I think where I could get to, though, mentally, is that if he is Macdonald's choice, then Macdonald really likes him. That they've had the deeper conversations that were like, hey, this is going to play out like this, and then this is going to happen, and then you're the guy because we are more eye to eye and simpatico. That's how I could get around it if it were to occur. Beyond that, big mystery box for me. And
he could always be like the consolation prize to whoever they're going after as well, like your backup. And, maybe that's where it falls. The idea of the breadcrumbs of him dropping his name, like, I've heard this from a number of the other Seahawks talkers out there. And I feel like you're kind of grasping at straws a little bit there, but who knows?
Well,
Maybe I could be totally wrong too. We'll see.
I mean, the only piece I'd say about that is it was very evident to me when I was listening live that he was mentioning certain people while excluding other people. And he was very much excluding Grubb and not talking about Grubb while giving some praise. Hey, you know, when we're looking for ingenuity, when we're looking to challenge the status quo, Peetz is always coming in with these things. Brandon, to your point, well, then why not more influence? And how come you couldn't get it done sooner? And I totally understand that.
Well, if you're Mike Macdonald and you're asked a question about the offense and you're going to have to glow up a couple of your offensive staff and you already know that you want to get rid of Grubb, like you have to pick somebody else to talk about. So it may not be that he just is in love with the guy. It might just be more like, well, I'm not going to glow up Grubb here because I'm about ready to can his ass. So I guess I'll talk about Jake.
I think the other things too that tell me that it's not a slam dunk pick is that today, talking about it, they talked about doing an exhaustive search. You wouldn't have to necessarily do an exhaustive search if you had the guy right there. And we've talked a bit about how Mike's not afraid to move on. He wasn't afraid to move on with some of the players during the season. If he really wasn't afraid and he thought he had the answer in the building, then why wouldn't he just say either Grubb has been demoted and elevate Peetz to play calling duties, or especially if you knew at some point in the season. I've heard people suggest that they knew, or that Coach Mike knew by the middle of the season that he was going to move on. Well, if you knew you had the guy in the building, then why didn't you do something sooner?
All true facts.
All right. Next up, this is one that I think a lot of people have been waiting for. He is the sexy name in football right now because he is the quarterback coach of the Vikings. He's Josh McCown, a former NFL quarterback, and he may be the guy well, you see him on the sidelines of those Viking games and right next to Kevin O'Connell. And I think that having that connection with Kevin O'Connell doing what he has done for this Vikings offense and this Vikings team as head coach, he's going to be the hot name for offensive coordinator throughout the league, and definitely worth talking about.
I am just baffled as to why he's such a hot candidate. Like, I can understand taking him into consideration, no doubt about it. But the idea of what the hell has he done as a coach? Like, what has he done?
Sam Darnold to be good.
Did he though? Like, because he goes to Carolina with Frank Reich, and they get nothing out of Bryce Young. Not necessarily their fault. Bryce Young stinks. Doesn't even make it through a season there. And then he latches on with KOC for a season. Sam Darnold has a good year. And let's not forget, KOC made Kirk Cousins the best version of Kirk Cousins. Now he's making Sam Darnold the best version of Sam Darnold. How much credit do you give to Josh McCown for that? I don't know that there's a ton to be given there. Maybe there is. Maybe I'm underselling it. Josh McCown to me is more of a Jordan Palmer type who is going to be really good at taking guys in the offseason and working with them and developing them as quarterbacks. I don't know that I've seen anything from him on a coaching level that makes me say, oh yeah, he's a play caller. Let's bring him in.
I think that part is a definite to be determined, right? So for some of the elder statesmen we've been looking at that, like, hey, they've done this. If that is an absolute prerequisite, then this is not going to be your guy. And that's going to be how that's weighted, and that's okay. But I do understand the excitement around him. I think he gets built up with, like, okay, he's got this 18 years, and what comes with that is he was known as this heady quarterback. And why? Because he wasn't the guy with the biggest arm. He wasn't the most talented guy, but he was a heady quarterback. So it kind of precedes him, Adam. And I think that's really what it is that there is this narrative that he's a cerebral, smart guy, and the players like him, and he knows how to scheme things. Now, again, beyond that, what it really looks like with X's and O's, now he's under Kevin O'Connell. That's cool. Absorbing all that, that's cool. Beyond that, though, I think we are throwing darts and just trusting that a guy that was in the league this long, who everybody says is cerebral, actually is. Now, I could get excited about this. I could be like, okay, he probably is. You probably don't stick around for nearly 2 decades unless you're valuable to the team in some way. Whether or not you're actually going to get in the game, or you are a bit of a quarterback whisperer as a backup for about a decade, decade plus.
Mhm.
There's probably something there. Otherwise, he probably doesn't get that kind of career. That's likely. You like to say, what's more likely? To me, that's more likely that he was always kind of grooving towards coaching, and that's why he had such a long career. I can make that equation work.
Yeah, and the hair is great too. Like he looks like he could be a Terminator. The glasses are a nice touch. Somebody commented that in the comments here. Yeah, I don't know. Not my top candidate. Again, wouldn't be mad, but the inexperience scares me considering where we're coming from.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of NFC North play callers, we can't leave out Adam Stenavich, who is now the Packers offensive coordinator. So I think a lot of these names are going to be popular as potential candidates just because of the success that we've seen from the Packers, from the Vikings, from the Lions. And with the offensive coordinator, I think that his name's going to be thrown out there too. Again, it would be whether or not Green Bay would allow him to be given up, and not knowing what his play calling background is, but he is a guy with offensive line experience. So if you're looking for a guy philosophically that is going to lean toward running the football, well, what better than a guy who played on the offensive line, went I believe he was did he make it into the NFL as an undrafted tackle, but just couldn't hang.
Yeah.
Anyway, he did have that offensive line experience, and so worked his way up through college in the coaching ranks, and was an offensive line coach at Northern Arizona and San Jose State before then joining the Niners as an offensive line coach, assistant offensive line coach.
Yeah, so this may be a total pipe dream about bringing in Adam Stenavich. He has an excellent name to start with, so that really helps things. Bringing in Adam, for sure he'll succeed. But this is one of the dudes that would be at the tippy top of my list. I love the way that Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers play offense. Watching them do what they did to us on that first drive in the game against Green Bay, I was like the meme you always use, Clinton, of Leo just pointed at the screen like, yeah, that right there. That's exactly what I want. I love his offensive line background. I think that's something we desperately need. Maybe if you give him the additional title of assistant head coach, does that make it something that is a upgrade or a promotion that you can get around the rule of the Packers blocking you? I don't know. But this guy, tippy tip top of my list, maybe even second on my list.
So, we got to remember too, and this is also for folks who are watching that don't know Adam Stenavich from Adam, right? The biblical Adam. He does not call the plays, right? So this is the OC in asterisk. Now, of course, he's there and he's game planning with LaFleur, but if you watch the Packers, the head coach, LaFleur, has the play sheet and he's calling the plays. In the same way that Adam Dirty does not call the defensive plays, Mike Macdonald calls the shots, right? So just understand that, listeners and viewers, just if you didn't know that already. I am attracted to the O-line piece of this because the way that I think you win football games is the way that you guys tend to think you win football games. And we play in an outdoor stadium. We have to play teams like the Packers that can run the freaking football, and you got to beat them. The piece for me that is a little bit of a scene missing, though, while I love the way the Packers run the football, I do not love the way the Packers throw the football. I think it's a lot of outside deep shots, and it's a little reminiscent of what Russ Ball was. And sometimes it could be super great, but I don't think it's highly efficient. And I don't think that's a Jordan Love thing. I think Jordan's a pretty capable quarterback. I think it's mainly a scheme thing. And I like the way they run the ball a lot. I'm not in love with the way they throw the football. I don't think it's as efficient as the Vikings will progress downfield or the way that the Lions will use the middle of the field. That's to me, it's a bit of like the abandonment of the middle of the field I don't see enough of, and a little bit of a scene missing for me, Brandon.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I think that there's some potential with this one. There's some questions though too, but I think that with that name and this name coming up with Marcus Brady, this was a name that I hadn't really considered much. And he has 7 years of CFL quarterback experience. And he also went into coaching within the CFL. He was a Grey Cup champion as offensive coordinator back in 2017. After also, he was a wide receivers coach on a couple of Grey Cup champion teams as well. And so he has championship level experience at the Canadian Football League level, but then he went and he moved up into the coaching ranks within the NFL, becoming the assistant quarterback coach with the Colts before then becoming the quarterback coach and offensive coordinator for the Colts in 2021, 2022. He then moved over to the Eagles for a couple of years and now is on that Jim Harbaugh staff down with the Chargers. So that makes the connection there potentially to Mike Macdonald poaching a passing game coordinator coach from his former boss at Michigan. What do you think, Adam?
This was an interesting one to me. And again, if we're not going with somebody with a lot of NFL experience, but he has some in when he was with the Colts as OC, was that when Frank Reich was there? Is that 21?
I believe that lines up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that he rubbed shoulders with Frank there. I really like the idea that he's spent some time with Jim and then also Greg Roman. People have killed me when they're like, well, what type of offensive coordinator would you like? I'm like, Greg Roman. Like, that'd be a dude I'd be really into. A guy who really does know how to run the football and form his team around that foundational piece of his offense. If Marcus Brady could bring that sort of offense to the Seahawks, sign me up all day.
So Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, widely considered two of the better quarterbacks in the league, and people could say who's better or whatever, that's fine. What I'm trying to draw between the two is what they ask of these quarterbacks, right? Herbert goes out there and under Brady, and then of course under Harbaugh on that team, he's asked to throw the ball like 26, 28 times. That's it. They play good defense, they run the football, and then they get their chunk plays because Herbert can get whatever chunk play he wants to, just like Burrow can. Burrow has better wide receivers, of course. And then Burrow, on the other hand, is like, hey, go play hero ball. We need you to throw the ball 45 times. So it's like, what do you want to be? And why I think this is a potentially, not saying it's a good choice, while I'm saying it's an important thing for us to look at as Seahawks fans, is I know what Mike Macdonald wants to do. And this was very evident from where he came from and his pedigree and how he talks about football. He wants to run a football team very much like the Harbaughs. And if you don't have Lamar Jackson, which we don't, and nobody else does, and but you do have a good quarterback, which we do, you want somebody like this. So it's just an interesting name again to float out there to say, if you see Marcus Brady getting a little bit of buzz and love, just understand that it's probably coming from a place of Macdonald wants to replicate what Harbaugh has done over and over and over again. If you can grab a guy that's doing it right now in year one and with the Chargers, it's a decent possibility. And Adam, you flagged this guy for me. And once I dove into him, like, kind of makes a little bit of sense, man.
Yeah, it does. And he would be a choice that I could get excited over. Again, my preference, as we're seeing some people kind of joining a little later in the chat, is to go with somebody that has some head coaching background, a little bit more experience. And but this guy would be higher on my list than a lot of the other maybe more quote unquote no names.
Yeah, I think he has such an intriguing background, and then now having so much NFL experience in his background, it does seem like if you're going to find a guy who's on his way up instead of on his way down, because really that's what you're looking for in the two different types of candidates, right? You're looking for either a guy who is head coach and is kind of on his way back down, maybe on his way to retirement to kind of have some continuity, or you get one of these young guys who's kind of on the upswing, and I would see Marcus Brady definitely more in that camp. So, and that also goes to Frank Smith, who is a guy who I believe we brought in as an interview. And was he for a head coaching interview? Because he was also offensive coordinator in name only down in Miami.
Right.
But also kind of one of those intriguing names that I know our Seahawks looked at last offseason. So again, much like Mike Kafka, you got to think, oh, well, he could be one of those potential guys now this offseason.
Looking at it real quick. I do like my tight end coaches. I think they tend to scheme
got that
differently.
Dan Campbell.
It's running hot right now, but also like they understand the duality of that position. And then he's been a run game coordinator also. The thing that I wonder is how close to McDaniel in style is he? And I don't know. I don't think we know. I'm sure there's Dolphins fans out there that could come on and talk about that. And if there are some that might end up watching this, I'd love people to, or folks happen to know, love to hear. McDaniel, obviously, a wildly vertical, quick RPO, slant game, and the first read over and over and over and over. And very often, Adam, you've pointed out that works really well in September and October, and then come late November when we're carving turkey, and then later in the year, the Dolphins hibernate, and that's as a mammal, that's not what they actually do, but they go bye-bye and they go to bed and they don't compete. I have no idea if he's McDaniel or he's his own guy. And Adam, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at him or can glean anything else besides what we know on the surface.
The only thing that would concern me about this hire is that he looks way too much like Brandon. It's just right here in this photo. Like, Brandon, turn a little bit more towards your microphone. There you go. Look at that. Yeah. And if you can
I don't
see,
know. I think Clinton might be a closer
Brandon's got
choice.
the baby blues though. Like, Brandon's got the baby blues, but
I have blue eyes, Adam.
I thought they were brown because you're often full of it. But at the end of the day, no, I'm kidding, man. At the end of the day, to be honest, I don't know jack about Frank Smith. So I don't feel like I have anything intelligent to add to it other than some of the horizontal first read RPO-y kind of stuff that comes out of McDaniel's system. Worked well for a year or two, and the league has seemed to caught up to it a little bit. And like you said, a lot of late season fades. But beyond that, I don't think I have any great insight on Frank Smith.
All right. We'll move on.
How about you, Brandon? Anything about him besides that we sort of look like him?
No, I exhausted my knowledge when I was doing the introduction part on the slide. So
perfect.
I know we considered him, and that was about it. It would just be, again, I think we're getting to the point of the list of these are guys that we should probably be aware of, just because they have some tangential relation. But maybe not necessarily anybody who is super exciting. I know we get to the final slide where it's Tom Arth, the quarterback coach of the Steelers, Wes Phillips, OC Vikings, Mike LaFleur, OC Rams. He called plays against us here in this last game. Aaron Cromer.
He called screens.
He called a lot of screen plays. But you know what? I think that's kind of what you do when you have Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback. So maybe he knows his players well. Aaron Cromer, offensive line coach for the Bills. Brad Idzik, the offensive coordinator for the Panthers. And anybody else that maybe chat wants to chime in with that we haven't discussed yet already. Adam, any names on this list that pique your interest a little?
Hey man, what an exhaustive list. I want to give us all a little pat on the back here. I think we did a good job, like coming up with a lot of different possibilities. And if you guys feel like the effort is worth it, hit the subscribe button. That'd be really nice. But with that said, of this list, Mike LaFleur appeals to me the least, only because his time with the Jets when he was OC there was pretty abysmal. Now, is that because just Zach Wilson sucked and there wasn't a lot that he could do? Maybe. Is it just because he's in a dysfunctional organization and he really was never going to have success there? Yeah, maybe. But but he does have the relation with Matt as well, and that's kind of nice. But the name that sticks out to me on this list is Aaron Kromer, only because of the way that the offensive line for the Buffalo Bills has been developed over the last few years. And man, they are a mauling, awesome unit, maybe the best in football. And so get me a guy who's been around that and knows how to build a unit like that, then that feels exciting. Now, does that mean that he can go out and call plays and be a creative offensive mind? I don't know, but that part of it, the offensive line background, really speaks to me.
Wes Phillips on there, of course, from just the Phillips lineage of NFL greats, right? So Wade, and then the father before, right? So
Bum, yeah,
Bum. Thank you, the Bum Phillips from the Houston Oilers, right?
Don't forget the cowboy hat, baby.
That's right. So again, OC, but in name only, because Kevin O'Connell calls the plays, and LaFleur, again, yes, he called screens yesterday or day before, or whatever it was. That's all good. Yeah, Idzik is interesting. Idzik again. Canales is out there and he's calling the shots. Idzik, he gets the asterisk because he spent 4 years with the Seahawks. I think he was a wide receivers coach with us, so that's kind of cool. So
assistant wide receivers coach.
There you go. The assistant to the manager of wide receiver coaching. So that's pretty cool too. So there's some interesting names here as well, and I love the points that you made on Kromer. So I won't repeat them. All I will say to add to it is, Dorsey is there a year and a half ago. They're middling. They're playing Josh Allen hero ball. They make the change to Brady and understand that even when you have Josh Allen, you play in Buffalo and you need to run the football with a talented guy named James Cook. Fast forward a year later, James Cook has 15 touchdowns this year, and they are primed to make a run. So I'm interested in if Kromer's been a part of that. Sure, let's bring the guy in for a conversation.
Yeah, a couple other names that we have not mentioned and could be available here pretty soon, and has some relationships with John Schneider because he worked with him either in Green Bay or with the Chiefs, and that is current Dallas Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy and offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer, who also spent time with the Seahawks. So we know that Schotty loves running the football, and he has that potential to call plays. Would he be a guy that Mike Macdonald would bring in from the previous head coaching regime to also call plays? That would be a really curious thing to see. I don't know if it would happen, but I'd be open to it, and I would be curious to see how it would play out.
I think Shoddy is looking backwards, and I don't think that's what Mike's about at all.
Right.
He seems like a very forward-facing kind of guy. Mike McCarthy, it sounds like he might stay in Dallas.
Right.
No.
Him as an offense, you don't think he's staying in Dallas?
I don't care. Just he is my absolute don't bring that guy near your organization. I think he's one of the most overrated head coaches. Put it whatever you want to put him in. I think he squandered. He got one championship out of Rodgers, and I watched that guy botch so many games. No, thank you.
No, I'm with you. I'm not a big McCarthy guy. And then Flagrant had the comment here about Pat Shurmur, and he would be also on the list of never freaking ever. That's a guy who just loves running spread and throwing the ball around the field. No, thank you.
Yep. So a big thanks to everybody who tuned in. I believe that exhausts our list of other offensive coordinators. Just a reminder, we are going to be here a week from today, Monday Night Football, as we cheer on our Minnesota Vikings against the stupid Los Angeles Rams. We want the Vikings to win, just to knock the Rams out of the playoffs as soon as possible. And so, we have, I don't know if there's anybody else in the NFC who I would really be against rooting for. We just have to get the Rams out.
Get the Rams out. Screw the Rams. Suck it forever, Rams. And go Vikes.
Well, leave your comments down in the comments section after we conclude the video. Let us know who you might be interested in. Clinton, I know you're interested in this conversation about who we want going forward to represent the NFC. Do you think it's going to be the Vikings?
I did until last night. It just turns out I'm not good at predicting football.
They were
So-
playing in Detroit. Dan Campbell had them all fired up. The crowd had them fired up. That one,
Yeah.
as soon as I started it, well, as soon as the Vikings went for
I
the
know.
failed fourth down,
Kick
now
the
down near
field
the end
goal.
zone. I mean, Sam Darnold, he's a bad red zone quarterback. We all found that out in the game yesterday.
Nope,
but,
he's way better than Geno. And see, when the pass rush gets going, like, see how much better he is than Geno.
I'm sitting there tweeting, so it's out there. I'm like, hey, NFL coaches seem to really dislike points nowadays. I don't get it. I know you're playing the Lions. You think you're gonna have to chase, but the game was close. Take 3 points. Take points.
Yeah.
You know, there was a point where they would have been up 12-10 if they just kicked a few field goals, and then the game's, who knows how the game breaks. But anyway, but you said, hey,
well, it almost flipped too when was it Van Ginkel who
Van
had
Ginkel,
a potential pick six and dropped it. So
And he freaking ginkled it.
he ginkled it right away. But
Ginkel
Yeah.
is Einhorn. Einhorn is Ginkel for sure. So, and yeah, we just, hey, we've been around here now, what, hour and a half or so, where we did do a nice deep dive. So I enjoyed it, guys. Hey, great way to start off like what is our off season, right? So it really fun to start it that way. Brandon, you and I would be back, I think, even tomorrow to do the tape review, 3 in 3 out for the last time this year, go through the ins and outs of that win over the Rams so we can celebrate that. We want folks to subscribe and share this, and really share it with a couple of 12s, because you got people on your phone, you got people that you chat with, you work with, et cetera. Just share it with them and bring them into the flock, because this train's going to keep on rolling. I believe, Adam, correct?
It's gonna, man. We're gonna keep doing it. Appreciate all your guys' support today. The over 200 of you that were with us live there for the majority of the show.
Yep.
Really cool to do this with you. And I'm looking forward to next year already, man. It's going to be awesome. Mike's D is going to be fantastic. Whoever we bring in for head coach, or for offensive coordinator, Frank Reich, is going to be awesome. And we're going to the Super Bowl.
Going to the Super Bowl. Big thanks to Ryan911 for the super chat today, and Scott Campbell Photography, as well as Dogzilla Monster. Clinton, got a big show coming up tomorrow. I can't wait to fire up that 3D printer one last time and print off an MVC trophy.
And I think with that,
There's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
go Hawks.
Go Hawks.